Everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
You actually don't want to know what celebrities think politically.
Folk tales are 15,000 years old. They're really old, and you can't mess with them.
Snow White, budget $250 million, box office $43 million. Oh, but it's only been 2 days, give it a chance. No, I'm not going to give it a chance. I'm not even talking.
And then she, like, minutes later followed it up with, and never forget, free Palestine. Oh, this is just like a few months after 10/7.
Love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird.
He would rewrite the entire story and spend $250 million plus $150 billion on marketing to make a dull mess.
This is what theaters look like across the world, and it just keeps getting worse. The memes.
Making another animated classic instead of making something new. But yes, it's all Rachel Zegler and her behavior.
And then they couldn't put dwarfs because this is just so typical of the left. The progressives always finding a way to find their way back to doing something not progressive.
It instantly became the #1 most downvoted trailer in the history of the platform.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
When does Snow White come out?
It was a wholesome family film, and now they've turned it into woke trash. Check this out.
Take everything you've ever heard about Hollywood flops and multiply it by 1,000, because that's how spectacularly Disney's Snow White just belly flopped. Imagine the star of your film showing up in a deserted theater, filming herself buying tickets for an exclusive screening that's basically empty. Now add a hurricane of political jabs, fan fury, and backstage drama, and you've got the ultimate cautionary tale of how not to reboot a cherished classic. Welcome to this extended deep dive into the Snow White catastrophe, an unmitigated debacle that saw Rachel Zegler go from rising sensation to the poster child for Hollywood's most cringeworthy meltdown. It's not just that the box office numbers are abysmal, they are, or that Snow White had a second weekend drop so steep even roller coasters might be jealous. It did. It's also that the entire production seems to have spiraled out of control from every angle. Fan backlash, behind-the-scenes drama, political rants, and more. Sit tight, because we're about to dissect how a movie that cost roughly $370 million to make and market ended up playing to near-empty theaters, sometimes with its lead star in the audience, looking like she was trying to console her own career in real time. From the very start, warning signs suggested that Disney's Snow White might not be the surefire moneymaker everyone expected. The 1937 original is foundational Disney history, the film that launched Walt Disney himself into the global spotlight. A modern reimagining should have been bulletproof, especially given the studio's track record of live-action hits like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. But almost immediately, this so-called update to the beloved tale sounded more like a demolition. Fans were initially intrigued by Rachel Zegler's casting, thanks to her singing talent in West Side Story. Then early interviews dropped in which she described the 1937 classic as weird and out of date, hinting at major plot overhauls that would diminish the prince's role. The grumblings began. Was this modern take about to strip away everything people loved in the original? As soon as those quotes hit social media, longtime Disney followers bristled. They didn't want a ground-up rewrite that treated the historic fairy tale like cringe content from a bygone era. They wanted a fresh coat of paint on something that had enchanted them since childhood, an update that could preserve the dwarfs, comedic interplay, and sweet innocence. Unfortunately, Zegler's comments made it sound like all that was getting tossed in favor of a new moral lesson. The louder she talked about fixing the story, the more fans suspected Disney was about to bulldoze a cherished part of its heritage. Everything blew up faster than anyone expected when Rachel Zegler dove into politics. It's one thing for a star to have personal opinions. It's another to essentially tell an entire electorate to stay away from your film. She didn't mince words, launching social media rants that basically told certain political groups she hoped they'd never know peace. That's a surefire way to damage a family film's prospects, especially one that needs broad appeal to recoup a massive budget. Disney executives reportedly freaked, realizing the brand that's supposed to welcome everyone was now tied to a lead actress alienating half the country. The meltdown escalated as older clips and tweets surfaced, revealing an even more aggressive stance. By the time advanced screenings rolled around, buzz was overshadowed by negativity, and the box office potential was already slipping away. Making matters worse were rumors that Zegler clashed with co-star Gal Gadot. Some whispered about snide remarks calling Gadot a pageant queen. Others noted that social media posts omitted Gadot from a cast-wide thank you, fueling theories of on-set friction. Disney, keen on Gadot's star power, was reportedly not thrilled by the idea of the film's two leading ladies feuding. Reports that the studio boosted Gadot's security after receiving threats tied to Zegler's vague statements hinted that this production was spiraling. Typically, major Disney films exude a family atmosphere during press tours, but this one had an undercurrent of grudges and tension that fans picked up on immediately. Meanwhile, the marketing juggernaut was in full force. Nearly $370 million were sunk into production and promotion combined, plastering Snow White all over billboards, store shelves, and social media feeds. But every time a trailer or a teaser dropped, fans fixated on missing dwarfs, replaced, it seemed, by magical placeholders. The studio apparently got spooked by issues of representation after Peter Dinklage criticized the original dwarfs concept. Instead of reworking them thoughtfully, Disney scrapped them, enraging the little person community who lamented the loss of iconic roles. People started asking if the new storyline was still even a fairy tale or just a lecture on modern values. Disney tried to emphasize empowerment, but it only shone a brighter spotlight on the ongoing controversies. Opening weekend arrived, and the result was an appalling $43 million domestic haul. Social media exploded with images of empty theaters, some practically deserted. Moviegoers who did attend posted videos capturing an eerie silence. By the second weekend, the film had plunged another 66%, quickly overshadowed by smaller or newer releases in fewer theaters. The IMDb rating spiraled down to an abysmal 1.5 at one point, and many wondered if the film might surpass some of Hollywood's biggest failures for the worst ROI. The meltdown dwarfed any moderate success it might have had in certain overseas territories. The negatives were just too overwhelming. But the most embarrassing spectacle of all might have been Rachel Zegler herself, filming an "I'm at the theater supporting my film" moment that showcased a shockingly empty auditorium. She looked excited, presumably trying to transform the fiasco into a quirky meme by saying, "Hey, guys, I'm in on the joke." Instead, it came off as cringe. People on the internet were merciless, pointing out how she once bragged that fans would line up to see her movies, only for her to sit alone in the dark. Memes mocking her, owning the flop, circulated widely, adding to the comedic tragedy of the entire situation. Industry watchers began predicting that Zegler's star power might be permanently tainted. Before Snow White, she was lined up for rumored roles in Toy Story 5, a Pirates of the Caribbean reboot, and even a Blumhouse horror franchise. In the aftermath of the meltdown, whispers emerged that those deals evaporated. Hollywood doesn't like actors who bring more controversy than revenue. Regardless of her talent, if she's perceived as a liability, studios will move on to safer choices. Insiders claimed that some big-name producers had attempted to rein in her social media presence, but by then it was too late. Fans had already formed a negative impression, and negative PR overshadowed any residual hype. Disney itself took a massive hit to its reputation. The company has weathered controversies before, but usually not at this magnitude. Typically, even a mediocre Disney remake can bank on nostalgia to hit solid numbers. This time, an avalanche of bad press drowned everything out. The Dwarfs fiasco, Zegler's political tirades, the rewrites that gutted the original's charm. It was a perfect storm that hammered home a new truth. Brand loyalty can vanish if you disrespect what people hold dear. Insiders were left dissecting the fiasco in frantic boardroom meetings, trying to salvage future remakes or, at the very least, learn from these mistakes. Then came the inevitable meme fest. Twitter and TikTok lit up with side-by-side comparisons of the 1937 Snow White, charming, melodic, iconic, versus the 2025 version, which fans slammed as hollow and condescending. Critics compiled clips of Zegler's inflammatory statements, spliced with footage of empty theaters, labeling it Rachel's personal apocalypse. Some might say it was ruthless, but in an internet-driven age, that's how public sentiment manifests. Once a film becomes the butt of jokes, it rarely rebounds. Toward the end of this train wreck, Rachel Zegler tried shifting the narrative, calling Snow White life-changing and emotional for her. But fans weren't in the mood to forgive. Many pointed out how she had dragged the original for months, so they saw the sudden gratitude as too little, too late. The meltdown basically came full circle when the final box office tallies hovered around a worldwide total that wouldn't even cover the film's rumored budget. Industry analysts pegged a potential loss exceeding $100 million. Given all the production values, star salaries, marketing, and promotional tie-ins, it was nothing short of a fiasco. What's next? For Rachel, a major image overhaul might be the only path back into mainstream Hollywood. She'd have to prove that she learned something from alienating half the audience and rewriting an 85-year-old fairy tale into a sermon. For Disney, this might signal the end of the unstoppable live-action gravy train. Fans want a modicum of respect for the classics. They don't want lectures, and they don't want to be insulted by the star they're supposed to root for. If there's a moral to this cautionary tale, it's that you can't just assume the Disney name alone guarantees success. Mocking an original masterpiece while alienating potential ticket buyers is a recipe for epic disaster. In the end, Snow White became a prime example of how an overinflated budget, an outspoken lead, and a dismissive approach to beloved lore can explode in a studio's face. Rachel Zegler found herself the center of a meltdown so grand that memes, tabloids, and analysts alike couldn't stop talking about it. Whether she can recover remains an open question. Hollywood has a short memory, but the internet doesn't. And for Disney, maybe the days of churning out remakes with minimal fan input are coming to a close, because if they're not careful, they'll be repeating Snow White's mistakes, alienating the fans who used to fill theaters every time a castle logo graced the big screen.